Hello guys, welcome to another YouTube video by Ross Perry Productions. In this video I'm going to be showing you how to remove and replace the front brake pads on a 2014 Land Rover Freelander 2 or LR2 if you're in America. And this is the petrol SI4 model. So the brake pads I'm going to be putting on are the Bosch brake pads and the number is BP1080. So these are the pads that I'm going to be putting on today. Now, limited number of tools that you'll need for this job, and I'll show you them right now. Okay, so I've laid out all of the tools and equipment that we're going to need for today's video. So we have a wheel brace and the jack taken from the boot of the car. Also have a jacking stand there just to put under for security. You can also just roll the wheel under on its side if you don't have one of those. Then I've got a torque wrench and just a long arm ratchet with an 18mm socket. We need that to get the caliper off. Then I've got some various pliers. So I've got nose pliers and normal pliers with a flathead screwdriver, which will allow us to get the spring clip off of the caliper. Then I've got some various bits to just clean the caliper up before we put it back together. So some brake cleaner, wire brush, toothbrush and some rag. Then we've got our BP1080 Bosch brake pads for the car. And then I've got my specialist retraction tool there. If you don't have one of these, you can make something up with a G-clamp. Got some copper anti-seize grease there as well. And then I'll probably go ahead and bleed the brakes. So I've got my little bleed kit there with some Castrol brake fluid .4. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to loosen each of the wheel nuts about half a turn, making sure the car's firmly on the ground at this point. So we're just going to now jack the car up and then place our jacking stand. Making sure the jacking point, if you're using this jack, the correct jacking point is just about here. Once you're happy the car is safe and secure, just go ahead and take the rest of the bolts off and then roll the wheel under the car. With the wheel now off, we can actually undo our two 18mm bolts, one at the top, one at the bottom. So for this, I'm just going to use my big torque wrench. You can use a breaker bar if you have one available. No need to take them all the way out just yet. Now what we're going to do is just get something to support the caliper once it's off, and we'll take those bolts all the way out. Once the bolts are now removed, you might want to just take the flexible pipe out of there. We should just be able to slowly rotate the caliper off the rotor like so. And once it's off, we're just going to rest that on something like that. Once caliper's off, we're just going to go ahead and protect the rotor or the disc. And then I'm going to just get the caliper and put it on top like that, so that's easy to get to this spring clip here. Now for the tricky bit, we're just going to go ahead, get our flathead screwdriver and just start to get the spring clip out. This is the way I like to do it. There's a few different ways you can do it. I find that is probably the most effective way. Like so. And now you will see that actually your pads have come off quite easily. The next thing we can do is we can actually pull this carrier all the way off, and that will pop this next pad out. As you can see, there seems to be quite a lot of dirt and grit behind mine. Now we can actually go ahead and pull this carrier all the way off, and I'm actually going to go ahead and grease these up when we put it back together. With all the components now off, this is where I'm going to go ahead and use my brake cleaner clean all the way around the seals, all the way around the piston. Make sure we get any of the sooty black mess off, and also use the wire brush on these components. Don't use the wire brush on the rubber, and make sure you get it as clean as you possibly want it to be. I'm now happy that this is all clean enough to be greased up and go back together. Before we go ahead and push the piston back, we're just going to have to go and open up the lid of the reservoir. To do that, come over to the left hand side or the passenger side of the vehicle, pull the bonnet release lever, come around to the front of the car. Just below the Land Rover sign there's a lever, put that up, then over the back here. This is where the brake fluid reservoir is. Just hidden in there. Just going to go ahead, undo that lid, like so. Check where your fluid is, and when you push the piston back, you're going to make sure that fluid doesn't rise over the edge. Before we even start to try and push this piston back, I'm just going to go ahead, get some copper grease, just very lightly put it around the rubber and around the piston. Not too much, but if you do put a lot on there, you can wipe it off. And this is where I'll use my special piston retraction tool. You can just use a G-clamp and a piece of wood to just get that back in, but I like to use this tool. Nice and gently push the piston back whilst checking on the fluid level. No need to force it back too tight. It's now time to actually grease the gliders back in. So again, I just like to use a bit of copper grease. No need to use too much. You don't want it to be pouring out once you pump it back in, and like I say, you can always wipe off the excess. Get a little bit just on the gliders as well. Get that all the way in. Now we're ready to start putting our pads in. Now one thing I like to do is compare the new pads with the old. So just making sure they're exactly the same. Size them up, put them against each other. As you can see, they're a little bit worn than the new ones, but I know they're actually quite old because they've been on the car since I've had it. We've done about 40,000 Ks at least on these ones. Make sure you're happy they're the right ones. Just bear in mind there is an inner and an outer, which this one here obviously goes inside the piston there. Then again, what we're going to do is just put a very thin smear, not too much, of copper grease on the back here. No need for too much, just go some on the springs just to make them go in easier, then just a very small bit around where the piston's going to push, and that will just stop you squealing when your brakes start to get a bit worn. Okay, once you're happy there's enough copper grease on there, you don't need too much. We're just going to go ahead and start to rotate the clip into the piston there, which can be quite tricky, making sure there's no grease on the front of the pad. You also need to make sure these two side prongs start lining up with the actual caliper. I'm just going to go ahead and use a screwdriver just to get that final pin in, like so. Then you might have to square it up, like you can get in, just like that. Once you get the other pad, just do the same thing. We're just going to go ahead and put a little bit of copper grease on there, just where these two portions are here, not too much. And then we're going to start to get this one nicely in here. like so. You can just wipe off any excess copper grease like so. Then we get our spring clip from earlier. The way I like to put it on, just push it straight in and up, making sure that this actually sits up. When you go ahead, get a flat screwdriver and rotate that round. Do the same with this one, making sure that clip is up before you go ahead and flick that round. Then that should all be locked in like so. Now we're ready to put the caliper back on. When your caliper's ready to go on, you're just gonna remove your protection. Very slowly start to slide the caliper over the disc like so, lining up the bolts on the back, and of course getting your bolts from earlier. Making sure your hose goes neatly back in its holder. Now we're going to go ahead and torque these two bolts up. Now I'm going to go ahead and bleed the brakes. I won't show you how to do that because there's plenty of videos on how to, but the bleed nipple is just on the back here and it's a size 9mm. Like I said, I'll go and bleed the brakes now, and then I'll make a very quick time lapse of me putting the wheel back on, dropping the car down, and my little outro video. Always remember to check your fluid before you put the cap back on. Do that up so it's finger tight, and then of course put your black plastic back. Check you haven't left any tools or anything under the bonnet. And there we go, that's my video on how to remove and replace the brake pads on a 2014 Land Rover Freelander 2. This is the petrol SI4 model. If you found this video helpful, please go ahead and give me the thumbs up. Leave me a comment down below. Check out some of my other videos, including the one on how to replace the rear brake pads, and please subscribe to my channel.